question, which is always the hard one. What is your name, first and last, and please spell them for us.
Sure. Brian Raison, B-R-I-A-N, like I care, R-A-I-S-O-N.
What would be your title if we wanted to put a title underneath you?
Do I look at you whenever I'm responding?
Okay. This is the only time I'll ask a question. After that, it's all there.
Associate professor. I don't know. I don't do titles.
CFAES then?
I am in the Department of Extension.
Yeah.
So OSU Extension,
Yeah.
Community Development is probably the most kind of generic, recognizable.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So Brian Raison, OSU Extension Community Development is just fine. I don't really need titles.
Okay, that's fine. We don't often use them, but
Yeah.
just in case, I always ask.
I don't think it'll impress anybody.
I always do this because if I don't edit this, or if I would
Oh,
just
sure,
play
sure,
it
sure,
by
sure,
and
sure.
have the footage of somebody
Well,
else,
yeah.
They got it. So I'm done.
I do like to be called doctor, though. You know.
All right, doctor. It hurts when I do this.
I've noticed with my studies at Fisher, like there are certain folks that do like to be
Oh, yeah.
professor and
Oh,
do
yeah.
like to be doctor,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so you,
Oh,
you
yeah.
tread very lightly.
Oh yeah,
when you
yeah.
use it.
Well, and that's fine. I don't mind that.
It pleases people. All right. They paid big money to get that doctor name. All right. I am quiet. Let's start the show.
Okay. But along those lines with community development, now I took a community development course over in public health, which
Mhm.
was a little bit different this summer. But do you guys work together, community development here within CFAES and their community development? They focus more on public health issues, but is there any
I don't
synergy
know.
there?
I don't know. Yeah, cut. I don't know the people in. If there's a community development class in other colleges, I don't know about them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
was just curious.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. I was just.
Well, make sure your phones are silenced if you haven't.
Yeah,
wired
I don't even know where mine is. So
All right.
it's over there somewhere.
All right. Well, we'll take that risk.
It's on silent, actually.
Good.
So, when I ask the questions too, we'll cut those out.
Sure.
So, your primary focus, reading your biography, was bringing together resources, people, information, ideas, and processes to positively affect outcomes larger than otherwise possible. So, working together within communities or cooperative businesses, groups of people
Mhm.
can create a greater positive impact than an individual or a single organization. What is needed to start? Where do we start to create those kind of communities that can have the positive impact?
Yeah, so to bring together, well, to have really the best impact or the most impact, I really think you need diversity. And so I think if you can wrangle together, as wide of a net as you can, then you'll have a better impact. The processes could include just, well, I don't think that was a question I was thinking you were going to ask.
Do you want me to ask it a different way?
No, you said where do you start? What's needed to start? Oh, that's what it is. I'm sorry. So I was looking for the prompt on what's needed to start.
Yeah. Well,
No, it's fine. I can still answer it.
okay.
So, so what's needed to start?
I'm thinking what I'm trying to get at with that is a lot of times folks will come to us with these ideas.
Sure. Yeah. I'm with you now.
And
Okay.
like how, and they're always great ideas,
Mhm.
and we can say like we can help you with
Yeah.
business planning, but,
But
like,
what do you
do
need to
they
start?
need?
Yeah,
Like,
what
what
do you
do
need
they
to start?
need to bring
Yeah.
to the table to get to
Mhm.
to start the momentum
Okay.
within the group that they're bringing as individuals.
I'm with you. So to achieve the greatest positive impact, to really launch that idea or to get things going, one, you need diversity, because the wider net you can cast and the more diverse your group can be, your organization, the more ideas you'll have and the more energy you'll have to populate it or to make it happen and to realize it. I hate to say this, but one of the things that can really launch it or get things going is a charismatic leader. Now, that's dangerous, because that charismatic leader, if her energy or his energy goes away, or if they move across the country or win the lottery, then it can just die. The two main pitfalls that I see with that is the group hasn't done the missional work of really thinking through what that is. Maybe the original idea is there, but they haven't built the mission on a solid foundation. It's just been the vision of that charismatic leader, so that can go away very quickly. The other piece is you haven't done the strategic planning and the division of labor so that you can figure out who's going to do what are the specific action steps and the strategies that will help us really reach this vision. That's a great idea. So you really need to have more than just that charismatic leader. You've got to have the idea to start, and then you've got to have somebody who will lead it, but they can't be on their own. So you need that whole team, and that takes a lot of coordination.
With that charismatic leader, is there ever a time, certainly with starting, but is there ever a time where that person can step back or maybe loosen the reins on that group, or do they really need to be involved from start to finish?
So with charismatic leadership, or with a leader in any organization, transitions are critical. And we see that. I just had a request to do a seminar on leadership transitions so that organizations wouldn't die, because we see that all the time. When I worked with a co-op, man, it's almost 10 years ago now, down in southwestern Ohio, and the young man and woman who were leading it were fantastic. They had the whole group together. It was a local food kind of idea. And when they moved, actually go back to graduate school, there was so much turmoil, and the group was not ready for that transition. They didn't build it in, and they tried, but it eventually failed. And 200 plus people who had actually paid in, a couple $100, the entire thing folded. And it was really sad. And I don't know what else they could have done. We were working on it. We did a lot of strategy work, but that was missing, and too much was being carried on their shoulders. And we didn't see that at the time. Now, with hindsight, you can look back and say, oh, man, we should have had more people in leadership positions. We should have had, if there could have been more transparency, it was pretty transparent, but just more communication, whatever it may have been. Yeah, but that transition is critical.
Mm-hmm. And planning for that is something that a lot of small groups, especially when they're kind of startup groups, don't really do, because you're doing so much of the daily, boots on the ground kind of work. So often groups that get started, then they stall along the way, or they come to some major challenge, or perhaps in governance there's a major difference in opinion, especially with diverse groups, because they all have kind of a different focus or maybe a different agenda. So how do we stay focused on the greater good versus bringing our own agendas or our own priorities to working within a group?
Yeah, keeping focus is difficult at best, but it's also critical. And so I advise groups a lot of times to go back to your mission. What is the bottom line reason? Why did you start this thing? If you've not read Simon Sinek's Start With Why, then go read that, or at least invest 17 minutes in the TED Talk and take some notes, because it's absolutely critical. I see groups drift in their mission quite a bit, and pretty soon if they get too far out on a tangent, then you start infighting, or you lose the focus. And when you're not focused on what you're supposed to be doing, it's easy to start to see a decline or even a complete failure. So get back to the mission. It's absolutely critical.
Okay. So another question was pertaining to the fact sheet, using discussion methods to inspire diversity, harnessing social and cultural capital, which I will link to in this. So
yeah, that was a Joe article, but yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. It talks about how diversity of worldviews, which we touched on a little bit, can enrich conversations and have a positive impact on the overall organization. So recruiting that kind of diversity, we talked about how having a diverse board or a diverse group of people to start the organization is important. How do we, within our own little silos, recruit that kind of diversity to bring in all the players that we need with all the skills that we need?
Often when you have an initial idea, or a person is launching the new initiative, a cooperative, whatever it might be, or a small group, it's pretty insular. You don't have a lot of diversity, and so the way to gain it, because you can get a lot of richness from the diversity, the way to gain it is to be really, really deliberate. It takes focus and specific action to go outside and reach beyond your immediate network. But that's a process, and there are some explicit steps that you can do in order to do that. And part of that is using your network or extending your network. But when you do that, then you bring richness in, and it can make a big difference. Otherwise, you keep that the small group of people who have this kind of the same idea, and so you won't get the same potential future impact or the bang that you might if you go for the diverse ideas. Plus, you can test your ideas better when you can have diverse input, because someone will ask the question, was this right? Versus everyone just going along with it and acquiescing and say, oh yeah, it's good. When you get those challenges, and they don't have to be, mean challenges, but just a positive, do we really need to think that or rethink this, or is this the right approach? Is there an alternative? And when you start looking at alternative approaches, any business person will tell you, and I came from private industry, you need those challenge questions. You need people to ask you, is this the right step? Is this the right system that we're getting ready to put in place? Or should we look at a different one or another one and do a comparison before we make the move?
A diverse board makes better decisions and strategy when each board member feels free and inspired to contribute his or her unique strengths to that team. So how do we create the right kind of culture or environment for this to happen? Oftentimes people get within a board and they do a good job. They put them together, they reach out, they get people that are within the industry and out of the industry, and it seems like they have the right players at the table, but there's not that freedom of expression almost within that board to be able to contribute those things. People are worried about stepping on each other. They don't feel empowered to contribute the skills that they're there to contribute. So I'm interested in how to create that kind
culture,
of environment.
yeah. So is my knee in the shot?
No.
Are you all right? All right. Organizational culture is absolutely critical. A friend of mine who's retired now used to say that your organizational culture will eat your strategic plan for lunch. And so just give it up if you don't have the right culture. So Tim and Brian Kite, that have Focus 3 consulting group, they work with the football coach and OSU team, and they talk about organizational culture and how the leader is the person who sets the organizational culture. It's the organizational culture then that drives the behavior, and the behavior produces the results. So that's kind of their flow. If you follow some of their work, it's fascinating stuff. The way the organizational leader creates that culture, though, or sets that culture, is the kind of the pivotal piece. So a lot of the things that I've been teaching lately, and I teach a graduate level leadership course here at Ohio State, and a lot of the things that we've been talking about in that is what we used to call soft skills, or they are soft skills. No, just forget that word. They're critical skills, absolutely critical skills, and the main critical skills that can help you develop an organizational culture that's positive and open and impactful in a positive way are, I think, authenticity and transparency. And so the leadership, or the leadership team even, not just the one kind of the main designated leader, but if you have a distributed system or a cooperative system, then that team, through kind of the authenticity and transparency, can really set a culture. People will see it and they'll respond to it. And so if you read authenticity leadership literature, you'll see things like intrapersonal perspective, where you think the leader or the small team that's leading thinks first about self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-regulation. What does that sound like? Emotional intelligence. So unlike IQ, which they say is fixed, our intelligence quotient, our EQ, our emotional quotient, can be learned and it can grow. And so if you start with that intrapersonal, and then the authenticity literature kind of goes on and talks about interpersonal relationships, where the leader learns the followers learn from the leader, but the leader learns from the followers. So there's a reciprocity that's involved. And then that developmental perspective that you can learn these skills and you can grow these skills. And when you do that, and when you kind of have that authentic approach and you're very transparent in your dealing, then the culture of the organization, whether those are your customers or your partners or your industry suppliers, whatever it may be, they see that pretty clearly. And when that's happening, when they see that organizational culture, then the behavior becomes the behavior that you need to get to the positive results.
We've seen that within one of the groups that we work with, the Southern Ohio Growers Cooperative.
Oh.
So they have 8 farms over 5 counties. But what's super unique is a couple of the folks on there never grew pumpkins before they got together. And a couple of those folks have been doing it
For years and years.
Years and years.
Uh-huh.
And they have such a good relationship of an open door and the transparency.
Mhm.
They came to mind right away when you said authenticity and
And
transparency.
transparency, yeah.
To be able to have almost a mentoring kind of relationship amongst
That's
the
beautiful,
members.
yeah.
Yeah, and I really think it's
Yeah.
the reason they've been so successful, because they didn't even have a set manager that was compensated until this year.
Wow.
So they were able to kind of get to that place
Uh-huh.
without that, and I don't think they would have had they have not had that transparency and authenticity that
It's pretty cool.
you mentioned. We might have already talked about this, but a diverse board with a variety of backgrounds and goals is also more prone to conflict.
No, you haven't asked that one yet.
Okay. The fact sheet group problem solving process offers tools that can be used to generate solutions to get past those conflicts. Can you describe the processes outlined in that paper, or processes that might be useful? It doesn't necessarily have to be that paper, and how groups might use them when they encounter a conflict.
So any group that comes together, any team, is going to have conflict of some sort at some level. That's just natural. So we have a fact sheet that talks about how do you develop or how do you work with conflict, and you know, you define the problem, you look for alternative solutions, you address the consequences, and then develop some action plans, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a good system, and it works. But most conflicts I see in my more recent, say the last 10 years of my 30 years I've been kind of in the business, I guess, I'm really seeing a move, or what as I'm facilitating, working with groups, toward that emotional intelligence and that those soft skills, those critical skills, to help waylay conflicts or help to put those aside and to work through to get to positive solutions. So the defined and prescriptive processes that we used to use are still valid. There's nothing wrong with those. But when you start doing the 5 kind of main things that are listed, Daniel Goleman in 1995 wrote the original or the seminal work kind of on emotional intelligence. When you start working on your self-awareness and your interaction with others, and you do that very transparently, then all of a sudden your actions start to change. When that happens, the conflict starts to go away. The one thing that's in Urban Meyer's book, Above the Line Leadership, he asked this question, what's your R factor? And so a lot of people have probably heard of this, E plus R equals O. So it's a 10-second, you can memorize this formula in 10 seconds. E, an event happens, plus R, your response, equals O, the outcome. Pretty simple stuff, really simple. But Brian and Tim Kite say that takes a lifetime to master. And so we have to, at every event, everything that happens to us is an event. And so how we choose to respond, do we press pause and engage our executive brain and make a good decision? Or do we go with that emotional response or reaction instead of the response, a reaction? So here's a question. What do you do when somebody's tailgating you? They're right up on your bumper. You know, you just, you might want to wave with one finger. You know, hopefully not, but that's what we want to do. That's our response. But instead, if we just take that time to press pause, and so that event happened, the tailgater, we press pause and say, wait a second, maybe they've had an emergency. Maybe they've had the worst day of their life. Maybe, and then you can take a breath and respond in a different way, not wave at them with one finger, not tap the brakes, which so many people do. I've been guilty. And it will change the outcome. And so with every interaction on a board, with decision making, with leadership transitions, those are all events every day. So how we respond changes the outcome dramatically, and it can make it wildly better.
Part of, as we've been talking, that you think might be helpful for groups? boards or otherwise, as they're thinking through maybe writing their bylaws, and how they're going to work together.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about things like that, and kind of the all other. One of the most important things that I think, and as I'm working with nonprofits or cooperatives or even departments here on campus, if I'm helping them do some strategic planning or long-range planning work, is to remember that the soft skill things, critical skills, we're not going to use soft skills anymore, that those critical skills are learnable. You can grow your emotional intelligence, you can grow your level of authenticity and transparency in the organization. When you do those, we're seeing studies and results and real examples out in the field of success. And so to me, that's one of the most critical things you can do is remember that you can learn, you can grow, and you can have a better response. You can improve your R factor in the E plus R equals O. When you do that, you're going to have a better outcome. I think that's one of the most critical things that I've seen. Yeah.
One thing that kind of came to mind back to when we were talking about the charismatic leader, the leader's involvement, do you have any tips for a leader that's wanting the group to take initiative or to be more involved, or perhaps to take ownership of
to get the group involved, to get more people involved?
To get, so you have a leader that's ahead of a committee or ahead of a board, and maybe the other board members are not super involved, or kind of, they're there, but they're not involved, they don't seem fully invested maybe. Any tips for that leader to inspire folks to take initiative in the goal, or to see the possibilities maybe of and find more purpose in their role as board members?
One of the most important things for an organization to be successful is to have involvement by the board. And so if you've got, and every board has members that are more active and less active. And so to activate some of those, or to motivate, I mean, all of us are driven by motivation, and generally there's two, are intrinsic and extrinsic, the things that motivate us. For the lower active board members that don't show up that often, one of the things that I've seen in practice is if you can re-engage them at the missional level, get back, have those conversations, particularly the leader of the organization, have a conversation privately with them and talk about, why did you originally join? What's the most important thing that we're doing here? And get them thinking about that why and that mission. Then it can be really engaging. Then you bring them into the strategic planning process, or if that's already occurred, then you bring out the strategic plan that is not a static document that sits on the shelf, but it's a dynamic living document where you're reporting back and people have assignments. And so maybe the board members that come all the time that aren't necessarily as engaged, if they're assigned a piece, an action item from the strategic plan, then they've got that extrinsic motivation to go do it, because they're going to have to make a report at the next board meeting. I see a lot of organizations that fail to do that. They do their strategic plan, they get some great action items, maybe one or two gets done, but there's no monthly tracking, there's no operationalization that is systematic, so that there's a report back every month, or there's an assignment to this person and to this person. The other thing is to remind them that they're not alone. So maybe you've got an 8-person board, it's a small group, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There are a lot of action steps. Remind them that their network and their friends and the associates and partners can come in and work on one particular action item. It can just be a temporary task force. They don't have to sign on for a year. They can accomplish that one thing and then move on. But you can really expand your capabilities by bringing people in on a temporary basis. to help accomplish tasks. And that can also be really engaging for the board members, because it's just a little bit energizing to get some outside perspective and blood, and then to report back. Once that becomes culturally kind of the norm, oh, at the board meeting next month we're going to be hearing reports. Then people get excited because things are happening. Now, if no progress has been made, that's okay too. So again, the leader and the organizational culture has to be okay with saying, all right, that didn't get done yet. Okay, is it still on the plate? All right, then good. And so an encouragement, goes a long way too.
Okay. Great. Is there anything else that we should?
I didn't have it. No, those were because I jotted down the soft skills, the critical skills, learnable. That's what I tell my grad students mostly. I tell them the E+R = O, and that EQ is learnable. That's huge. I mean, that's just huge.
I think so too. Okay. I think we're good.
All right, very good.
Cool.